This is Carrie Johnson with the Iowa Department of Management. This webinar will be a brief overview and review of basics of county property tax levies and information needed to complete the fiscal year 23 county budget in the Department of Management's online system. If you're an experienced budgeter, familiar with county property tax levies, etc., you might want to review the other webinar I have available that's more just sort of a update and reminders. This one is going to go into a little bit more detail regarding the basics of county property tax levies and things of that nature. So what we're going to do first is provide some general budget information. And we'll start out with the location for most of the things that folks are going to do as counties, county auditors with the Department of Management as far as on the website and a place to go for information. So I would suggest you go to the Department of Management's page, dom.iowa.gov/counties. We call this the county resource page. And this is where you'll see links to a variety of pieces of information that you may use, as well as webinars that we record, things of that nature. So you might want to bookmark it for easy and quick access. Okay, so Department of Management's role in the budget process is that we provide the forms, including web-based forms. We provide instructions, and we provide technical assistance for all local government budgets. So if you have a question regarding the form itself, the online system, or anything that goes along with that, as far as county budgets go, then I would be the person you would follow up with. So as we walk through the different levies that are available for counties for property tax, keep in mind 331.301. And that indicates that a county shall not levy a tax unless specifically authorized by state statute. So while counties do have home rule, they do not have the ability to levy any tax unless it's specifically spelled out in Iowa code. So any tax that you see is going to have a particular code reference that you can also go to and review for greater information. So there are categories of your property tax levies. Counties have general county services that would apply within the entire county. So rural and urban. They have rural county services that, of course, would apply only in the unincorporated area. They have debt service, primarily to service general obligation debt. And then you have other taxes as provided by law. So examples there would be emergency medical services, unified law, for example. So let's talk about your basic property tax levies. These are important levies for the county to use. There are levy limits for those particular levies. So if we talk about our maximum basic levies, it is $3.50 per thousand of taxable value for general county services. And those are services that are primarily intended to benefit all residents of the county. Includes secondary road services, but does exclude services financed by other statutory funds. And then we do have a $3.95 per thousand limit of taxable valuation for rural county services, those services that are primarily intended to benefit those persons residing in the county outside of incorporated city areas, including secondary road services, but excluding services financed by other statutory funds. So that's when we talk about general basic, we're talking about this $3.50 per thousand. When we talk about rural basic, we're talking about $3.95 per thousand as the levy limits. Now, there is an opportunity to exceed those levy limits of $3.50 and $3.95, but it's only for reasons set forth in 331.426. So things like increase in population, a natural disaster, things of that nature, reduced or unusual low growth in property tax base. need for additional monies to permit continuance of a program. So there are reasons by which a county can exceed that $3.50 or $3.95 found in this section of code. So how would a county do that? There's two ways. It's either by special levy election or by including additional information with a notice of public hearing on the county budget. And what you'll find is the process laid out in 331, 425, and 426. If you've not done this process before, I certainly suggest that you consult your county attorney prior to pursuing to make sure that the reasoning that you're using does meet one of these parameters. You do have, as well as those basic levies, you have supplemental levies, and those are limited in purpose but not in amount, so they're not rate limited. The supplemental levy for general services is 331,424.1, and for rural is 331,424.2. Your general or rural basic levy must be at the limit before going ahead and using the applicable supplemental levy. So if you're going to need to levy for supplemental, your general would have to be at $3.50. For rural services supplemental, your rural basic would have to be at $3.95. So we're going to sidetrack a little bit here to talk about a change for the fiscal 23 budget. Legislation was passed. Senate File 619 was passed in the 2021 session of the Iowa General Assembly, and it eliminated the county mental health and disability services property tax levy for fiscal 23. So if you worked in county budgets prior to fiscal 23 that we're starting up right now, your county would likely have levied property tax for support of mental health and disability services. In fiscal 23, you will no longer levy tax for mental health and disability services. And to go along with that, unless you're Polk County, you will no longer have a mental health and disability services fund or any service area 4 expenditures for fiscal year 23. So service area 4 being that mental health intellectual disabilities service area. You will, though, everyone would have to report on fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 21 service area 4 expenditures. The reason for that is statutorily the budget you submit has to include 3 years of data. So the fund existed, expenditures were made out of that fund in service area 4 for fiscal year 22 and 21, so you'll have to report on any of those expenditures within the budget. For those years, fiscal year 23, you're not going to be reporting much of anything. Unless you're Polk County is going to operate in the same manner as before. Senate File 619 requires counties to deposit the remainder of balance held in your MHDS fund to their region prior to the end of that fiscal year. So you're going to need to coordinate with your region the payment of any existing fund balance to the region prior to the end of 2022. You may need, just sort of as a side note, you may need to amend your budget to allow for this expenditure. So just kind of be aware of that. The expenditure line you would use would be distribution to the regional fiscal agent for that payment. There has been some discussion regarding MHDS regions. They may still want individuals to remain county employees but provide that service for the region. If that is desired by the region and counties, you would need to consult legal counsel and devise a 2080 agreement to provide the terms of that contractual service. Reimbursable contractual services need to be clearly defined and tracked to comply with audit requirements. Again, as a county, you're not expending for those mental health and disability services directly. The expenditures that you make for county employee costs should be fully reimbursed and covered by the region. In those instances where you have a county employee that's paid via reimbursement for the region and then also other functions, you're really going to have to detail out some timesheets and time studies to fully determine the cost share. So that would be something you'd want to document for your audits. And we did add a new function for the reimbursable MHDS expenses, and you'll see that on your budget forms as 9040. For questions regarding assets, who holds title to the asset, county versus region, who maintains it, that's all going to need to be determined locally. And then I do know that there are questions concerning cash flow, and I think the region and the county would need to come together via legal counsel and their 2080 agreement and determine if there could be startup costs provided and things of that nature. So that would create or cause some discussion there locally. Regarding tracking a situation, again, where the region and county have a contract for the county employee to deliver the service, which then is reimbursed by the region, the County Finance Committee recommends the following. Use a sub-fund of the general fund. Again, a new function item has been added, like I mentioned. You'll see it on your budget forms. It's right here, 9040 reimbursable MHDS expense. And then when counties receive that reimbursement from the region, the revenue code to use would be 2545 right here, which is existing in the chart of accounts. So payment from the MHDS fiscal agent to MHDS regional members. So that's sort of a summary of some of those MHDS changes, and we'll segue back into the regular levies that are available to counties. Debt service levy is to pay certain judgments, interest and principal on general obligation debt, certain payments under lease or lease purchase agreements, and also the lease cost of a joint city-county building. So you may be levying debt service as a county to provide some of those services, and that would require the use of and completion of the long-term debt schedule in your county budget. Cemetery levy limit of 0.0675 per $1,000 of taxable value to repair and maintain cemeteries under the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors, including pioneer cemeteries. It is levied and accounted for within the general fund, and about 20 counties use the levy. Emergency services levy. This is a situation where a county is providing fire protection to a township under 331-385. They would have an emergency services fund within their accounting, and they certify taxes for the township within the township, not to exceed the levy limits that exist for townships in 359.43. This is currently only applicable in Polk County. But if you have questions regarding the emergency services levy, you can definitely review those sections of code. Unified law enforcement levies under Code of Iowa Chapter 28E. The county levy is only on the unincorporated area and is limited to a maximum of $1.50 per thousand. A vote of people is required to establish this levy. It is rarely used, but you can find more information in 28E 22. That's where you'd go for greater information. Flood and erosion control, this is to be levied only on agricultural land value, limited to 0.06750 per $1,000 of taxable value. Code of Iowa 161E9, not, again, a levy that's been used. Emergency Medical Services Levy received some attention in the last legislative session. There was some amendment to the existing statute. The existing statute is 422D. It was amended, as I said, in this last legislative session by Senate File 615. So if you're considering this levy, definitely review Senate File 615 and the amendments that were made to 422D in that legislation. So now emergency medical services levy is for up to 10 or 15 years, depending on population, as approved on election. And you do, as a board of supervisors, they would have to adopt a resolution declaring emergency medical services as an essential service, and a vote of the people would be required to establish this levy. So again, if this is something you're considering, definitely review those items and consult with your county attorney. County budget and tax rates. So folks sometimes when they prepare their budget want to look at historical information or maybe compare themselves to other similarly situated counties. Again, if you are seeking that type of information, you'd go to our county resource page and you'll find a link to county tax rates. And you'll see in the county tax rates, it's several years of tax rates. It goes by county and it lists for each county the different, rates that they're levying, the total tax, total rule only, etc. So it's definitely something to review if you're looking for historical information or comparison information. And I'm going to segue for a moment too to another change that was made in the past legislative session, and that's regarding the process for commercial and industrial replacement. If you've been around for a little while, you may be aware that counties receive payment for the replacement of commercial and industrial dollars. Back in 2013, the session of the Iowa General Assembly, they passed Senate File 295, and it created a commercial and industrial replacement process. Commercial, industrial, and railroad property, because railroad property must be treated in the same manner as commercial per statute. So railroad, commercial, and industrial, what the legislation did is it said, okay, they're not going to be taxed at 100% of their value. They're going to be taxed at 90% of their value. So their value percentage was rolled back to 90%. As part of the legislation, the state then would make a replacement claim payment to the county treasurer, which the county treasurer would then distribute to the levy authorities within the county in September and March of each year. So essentially, the legislation rolled back the value by which those classes were going to be taxed, and then agreed to make a payment to levy authorities to make up for part of that loss for commercial and industrial piece, not the railroad piece. So that's been in place for a number of years. In the 2021 legislative session, the Iowa General Assembly passed Senate File 619, and that phased out the state's replacement of payments through either fiscal year 26 or 29. And whether your county is phased out over 5 or 8 years depends on if you are classified as a qualified levy authority or not. A qualified levy authority is one that had a taxable valuation increase between the years of fiscal 14 and fiscal 21 that was essentially less than the statewide average growth. So, yeah, as a county, did you grow more or less than the statewide average during that time? Is essentially what it is. So, in summary, then what the county received in replacement claims in fiscal year 23 and moving forward would be phased out by either a fifth or by an eighth each year until they receive zero. So, to see an estimation of the revenue to be received in the current year and the revenue to be received during the phase out, Department of Management does have a tool listed on our website that you can take a look at. That should be posted shortly with the estimation amounts for commercial and industrial replacement moving forward. On the budget forms, you'd report the revenue under 2200 other state tax replacements. The following code was added back when the legislation was passed. to track the payment specifically. County budget summary. This again is just sort of a source of information if you're interested. On the Department of Management website, you'll see a link to this information. So again, that county resource page, you'll see a link to, all just full budgets. If it's fiscal year 20 and older, you go to one website application, and if it's newer budgets, you go to another, the current website application that you're using. And what the county budget summary is, it's a tab for revenues and a tab for expenditures, and it just provides some summary data for each and every county for those years. So again, just if you're interested in finding some information or doing some comparisons, it's just a resource for you. And this is kind of what it looks like. So this is the revenue one. It pulls some of those major summary lines from your budget for each and every county. And again, just a way to do some research, historical or what have you, make some comparisons, whatever you might be interested in. So we'll take some time now to review the general budget timelines. County auditors certify value to Department of Management and all levy authorities by January 1. That value, of course, is what you would tax against in your budget. County departments submit proposed expenditures and revenue by January 15th. The board files the proposed budget with the auditor, allowing time for the budget to be lawfully published and certified by January 20th. So that's when they file the proposed budget. The notice of proposed tax asking, the max levy, is published and posted on applicable county websites and social media and newspapers, obviously, not less than 10, no more than 20 days prior to the date of the hearing. A hearing is held for taxpayers and residents of the county to present to the board their objections to or arguments in favor of that asking, or the max levy as we refer it. The board adopts the tax asking by resolution. If the tax asking increases from the current year's asking by more than 2%, a 2/3 vote is required to pass that resolution. The resolution does need to be posted on the county website if applicable. And it has to stay there in perpetuity. To continue with the budget timelines, the regular notice of public hearing and proposed budget summary is published then not less than 10, no more than 20 days before the date of the hearing. The hearing is held for taxpayers and residents to speak for or against the budget. The board then would adopt the budget by resolution. They direct the auditor to certify by March 31st. Citizens would have until April 10th to file a budget protest. County auditors certify the county budget along with all the other budgets that they certify. And Department of Management certifies property tax rates to county auditors by June 15th. County auditors provide the tax list to county treasurers by June 30th. So that's an overview of the timeline. And again, your budget deadline for submission for counties and then cities as well, because they're covered by the max levy requirement, was moved a couple years ago to March 31st. So your budget deadline is March 31st. Taxes levied by a county whose budget is certified after that March 31st deadline is limited to the prior year's budget amount. The penalty can be waived by the Director of Department of Management if the county demonstrates to the satisfaction of the director that the deadline was missed because of circumstances beyond control of the county. So if you are in a situation where you as a county do not feel you're going to be able to meet that March 31st deadline, please contact me as soon as possible, and I will instruct you on the process to request an extension from our director. But again, keep in mind, it's for circumstances beyond the control of the county. Not being able to reach a consensus vote, or, certain things that you could, as a county board of supervisors, control are not necessarily going to meet that test. So just kind of be aware of what's going on and what might be viable as a request for an extension. Budget protests, again, those budget protests have a deadline of April 10th, so essentially 10 days after your March 31st deadline. And there is a requirement with legislation that passed that there's information on protesting the budget included in your hearing notice, and we provide that. It is included in the language at the top of your notice, so that's not something additional you have to do. The protesting a local budget is covered by Code of Iowa 2427. So folks that are impacted by your taxes or your expenditures can gather signatures and file a petition. The number of signatures required is not less than a certain percentage of folks that voted on the governor at the last election. But with counties, in addition, they do have to submit at least 100 signatures. So 100 signatures essentially is what we're looking at for county budget protests. So they would, circulate their petition, get their signatures, and file that by April 10th, like I mentioned, to the county auditor. The county auditor would then forward the protest documents to the state appeal board. The state appeal board is a 3-member body that is made up of the director of Department of Management, the treasurer of state, and the auditor of state. So upon receipt of a petition, they would schedule a local hearing in the county that was protested, where the petitioners and the county can speak to the issues raised in the protest. The state appeal board would gather all that information and they would render a decision on the budget. They can decrease your expenditures and decrease your tax revenue. So, upon adoption of a budget, a board must appropriate by resolution the amounts deemed necessary for each of the different county officers and departments during the ensuing fiscal year. Without an appropriation, expenditures are not authorized. So, this is a step that occurs after your budget. Appropriations need not be made in any specific level of detail. So, there is variation by county as far as what exactly is described in that appropriation resolution. So you would want to look at, historically, how has that been handled in your county, and what is the current board's desire as far as how that looked. It is unlawful for a county official to authorize an expenditure larger than the amount that was appropriated by the board. So if you have questions regarding appropriation language, you would want to review this section of the Iowa Code. Budget amendments are required for any increase in the totals for any one of the 10 major classes of expenditures listed on your adopted budget summary. So public safety and legal services, physical health and social services, mental health, intellectual disability, and developmental disabilities. That would be only for the current year, because unless you're Polk County, this would be the last year you're expending out of that area. County environment and education, roads and transportation, and governmental services to residents, administration, non-program current, long-term debt service, and capital projects. So these are your classes of expenditure, service areas, what have you. So if you're going to exceed the amount you budgeted for any of those areas, then you would need to do an amendment. Keep in mind that amendment must be effective before any of the expenditure amounts are exceeded. So you must amend before you spend. Budget amendments require the same notice and hearing procedures as required for the adoption of the budget. So a notice must be published not less than 10, no more than 20 days prior to the date of a hearing you're going to hold on that amendment. Budget amendments are subject to protest. An amendment of a budget after May 31st, which is properly protested, but without time for that local hearing to be held by the state appeal board, is going to be void. So keep in mind, if you're getting close to June, right close to the end of the fiscal year, and you think you need to amend, go ahead and amend. But there is a possibility that if it's protested, you wouldn't have time to hold that hearing locally for the state appeal board, and so then your amendment would be void. A budget amendment process is not impacted by the max levy process. There is no additional steps related to the budget amendment. It's the same as it's been for several years. The amendment form is found by logging into the same online system that you use to adopt your fiscal year 23 budget. You just pull up that fiscal year 22 budget and select amend. A webinar on the amendment process is viewable on your county resource page again. And you can also, once you're in the amendment in the online system, you can also access some instructions. With departmental appropriations, increases or decreases in those appropriations are not going to require a budget amendment unless you, again, exceed one of those classes of expenditures. But changes in departmental appropriations may be provided by resolution at a regular meeting of a board. Obviously, any increases in a department would have to be offset by decreases in another department, so those expenditure classes are not exceeded. But decreases in appropriations for an office or department of more than 10% or $5,000, whichever is greater, are not effective until the board holds a public hearing on that proposed decrease. And that public hearing is required to have notice similar to the budget of not less than 10 or more than 20 days prior to the date of the hearing, and in all the county newspapers that you publish your budget notice in. So I'm going to take a few moments to provide a reminder of this max levy process that was put in place for Senate File 634, passed a couple years ago. And the reason why I want to do that is because I do think it's still relatively new for folks. It's a little different. It's pretty specific in what's required. So I just want to make sure that folks understand the different steps. So this legislation passed in the 2019 session. It was Senate File 634 if you want to go pull it up and look at it. And it's an attempt to further notify the public about property tax increases. It only impacts city and county budgets. So your ag extension, your county assessor, et cetera, they don't need to take these extra steps. It's cities and counties. It requires an additional public notice, public hearing, and resolution on top of the budget process that other folks do and what you're still going to do. So it's an additional step. It must have a separate not less than 10 no more than 20-day notice period. There are certain pieces of information that have to be shown on the notice and in the resolution that's passed after the hearing. Requires the notice be posted to county social media and websites, and requires the resolution to be posted after the fact to the county website and be kept there. So the Senate File 634 impacts only a portion of your county levies. It impacts the county's general basic and general supplemental, and then rural basic and rural supplemental if the county uses those as well. It requires specific information on a hearing notice. So essentially it's 3 columns of data. The first column is going to be the certified tax rate and requested tax dollars for those levies that I mentioned for the current year. So what are you asking for in dollars in the current year? Column 2 is going to say, okay, what would be the rate and requested dollars if the requested dollars were not increased from what they are in the current year. So we apply the requested dollars to the budget year value and see what rate is calculated. Column 3 is the proposed budget year property tax rate and requested dollars. So column 3 is what do we want to do in the budget year? What do we want to request for those levies? So again, just kind of to take a look at it as an example, this is what the notice looks like when it's completed. So the first column again is, okay, in the current year, what was our value for, total general value? What was our rural value? And as a county in the current year, what did we ask for in tax dollars? So property tax and utility or replacement tax asking. What did we ask for in dollars for general basic and general supplemental? And then here's the total of those. And then what did we ask for rural basic and rural supplemental? Again, here's the total. What were the rates? So as you can see, this is all white because this information is pulled in here for you. We have your current year budget. We're populating this and saying, okay, this is what you have in the current year. You don't need to do anything with this. So this is your current year information. And then this middle column is saying, okay, well, our value increased. But if we held our tax dollars the same as this, so this equals this, right? What would our tax rate do? Again, value increased, keep the tax dollars the same rule, what would our rate do? In most cases, your value is going to go up at least a little. This is some major value increase, but your value is going to go up. So your rate's probably going to go down if you were asking for the same amount of dollars, right? So this is just a comparison. Again, you don't have to do anything with this column. It's populated for you. Okay, so final column is again, okay, in our budget year, this is our value, right? What do we want to ask for general basic and general supplemental? Maybe we're asking for an increase. What would our resulting tax rate be? Okay, and then same, this is our value, this is what we want to ask for in tax dollars for the budget year. What would our tax rate be? Proposed tax rate. Okay, so only blue cells are cells that you enter into. All the rest of this is populated for you. So you're going to be putting in your general information. You're going to be putting in your requested for the budget tax dollars for general basic, general supplemental, and then if applicable, rural basic and rural supplemental. And then the form is also then going to calculate for you the proposed change for both, right? And if there's any increase, you're going to need to come down here and explain your increase. So general services increase are due to XYZ, rural services increase are due to whatever. So you're going to need to explain your increase down here in this blue cell. There's no specific requirement on how much information is listed, but you do need to explain your increase. If you're saying exactly the same or you're going down, then come down here and just list, no increase or tax asking going down, whatever, right? So have something in this cell because it's going to give you an error if you don't. And then if applicable, the above notice is also available online at your website, if applicable, and then also any social media, you would list that there as well. So again, this is the very first thing you do. You're going to go to the max levy and you're going to have to be prepared with your tax asking and reasons for increases. So after the hearing, a resolution must be adopted that approves that max tax dollars that can be actually adopted in your budget for the next fiscal year's budget. If this amount is more than that 2%, more than 2% than the current year, if budget year is more than 2% of the current year, that resolution's got to be passed by a 2/3 vote of the governing body. The majority of counties have 3 members, so this would be a regular 2 out of 3 vote, but if you have 5, then obviously it's 4 out of 5. The adopted resolution must be posted on the county website and social media accounts if you have them, and it needs to stay on your website for perpetuity. The resolution itself needs to include the following: a statement indicating that the publication posting requirements of the bill were met, a statement indicating the date of the public hearing, a not to exceed statement for both general and rural county services maximum property tax dollars, an indication if the dollars requested resulted in a greater than 102% increase for either general or rural services, and an ability to indicate the vote of each member. And this is needed to make sure we're complying with that 2/3 requirement for the vote if it was greater than 102%. And we do recommend consulting with your county attorney on any specifics related to your particular county and the resolution itself. We do have, as part of the budget instructions, an example of a resolution that might start sort of the basics for you. Again, consult with your county attorney on what your actual resolution needs to look like, but this is an example you could start with. At that point, then you pass your resolution, setting your max levy, and then you can proceed with the budget process as you had always had before, which means you set a date for your public hearing. You have that public hearing. You had given notice not less than 10, no more than 20 days prior to the date of the hearing date. Again, there's a requirement for the regular public hearing notice to include a statement regarding the process to protest a budget, and that's already in there for you. You must complete that Senate File 634 notice, public hearing, and resolution adoption prior to setting the date for your regular budget public hearing. So you can't do these things at the same time. You do max levy, adopt your resolution, set the date for the regular hearing. You can approve less property tax dollars in your max levy resolution than you published in the notice. So you can say that you want, $2 million in general services in the initial hearing on the max levy, but then when your board approves a resolution, it can be something less, but you can't go higher. In the adopted budget, then you can also ask for less property tax dollars than you approved via the max levy resolution, but not more. So you could have, said in your max levy resolution that was adopted after that hearing that you wanted to have 150, a million five in general basic. But then when you go on to work up your budget, you decide you need just $1.3 million. So you can always ask for less, but you can't go up. So I'm going to take some time now to go over the online budget system. If you had worked in the system at all in the past year, it is the same system now for valuations for budgets, budget amendments, and annual financial reports. Login access should transfer, but if you're a new individual or someone in your staff needs access or someone needs to be removed, please email me. As a county auditor role, you're going to see valuations, you're going to see annual financial reports, county budgets, all the other budgets in your county, amendments and everything via one portal. And schools are going to actually be coming online this year as well. If you use the tab keys during data entry, it does move between the cells in which you can enter data, and you can also do the arrow keys side to side and up and down. As a reminder, ending fund balances are produced by subtracting the sum of all expenditures from the sum of beginning balance plus revenue. So that's how we arrive at an ending balance. As you move within a page, the cell that you're in is highlighted and the row and column show a green highlight just to try to help keep you oriented in the system and where you're at. When you're ready to work in the online system, you go again to that county resource page, and there's a blue button kind of in the middle. You go down a little bit, and there's a blue button that says Submit Valuations, Budget, and AFR, and you would log into the system using your Enterprise A&A account ID. Once you log into the system, again, you'll log in. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see various pieces of information that are available to you as a county auditor. And on the main part of the screen, you'll see your budgets if you select budgets, right? So you select your budgets. Here's your budget screen. For this online system we're using now, we've done budgets in there for the last couple years. So you'll see 21 budget, 22 budget, and then our new 23 budget. So these would be finalized, obviously, but if you need to amend your current year budget, you're going to be going to the amend button for fiscal year 22. So just sort of as a side note. But to work in the 23 budget, you're going to click edit. So when you're in the budget forms themselves, after you've selected edit, you'll see the different tabs across the top, and these are all the different pages that you would work in your budget. So the regular budget hearing notice is the hearing budget adoption. This is the regular notice. The maximum property tax levy notice that's required that we've been talking about is the max levy notice. Um, Budget summary is proposed budget summary. Adoption of budget and certification of taxes is property tax. Revenues details found right here. And then these are all service area 1, 3, etc. are all your expenditure tabs for your service areas or classes of expenditures. Here's your long-term debt schedule. And then if you're a county that needed to exceed the general basic or rule basic that we talked about earlier on in the presentation, you would need to complete these tabs: exceed general or exceed rule, whichever one is applicable. Now, if you're not exceeding, you simply ignore these pages. Now, they will print off for you. Again, just ignore them. You don't need them unless you as a county are planning to exceed and you're completing the pages to exceed the general or the rule levy limits. So you will be entering your revenue and expense detail on all those supplemental detail sheets on the revenue, the long-term debt, service area tabs. The data on those sheets are going to automatically total and pull forward to the proposed adopted budget summary page. So just sort of an FYI. So the budget summary page, just to sort of underscore, see how it's all white? White cells, you're not entering anything there. This is all going to be populated for you after you've completed your other pages. The tax page, so this is where you're going to be setting your tax asking, the property tax tab. This is going to populate with the value after your county auditor or whoever in the auditor staff files property values in our system, in the DOM system. Once those are filed, it's going to populate those values for you. And then all you're doing on this page is filling in your property tax dollar request, or your request with utility replacement and property tax, I should say. So you plug in your tax asking for your different funds here, and it's going to calculate then a rate, right? It'll calculate a rate for you and then also calculate what that means for property taxes without utility replacement. So that's going to do the calculation for you. Again, white cells, it does the calculation for you, or it's pulling from somewhere. And just keep in mind too, as I mentioned before, you used to have mental health and disability services listed here as a levy. That's no longer on the fiscal 23 budget. So again, like I said, valuations are populated. Once your county auditor files value, it's going to be populated into the property tax tab as well as the max levy tab. And until valuations are filed, and anytime the county auditor would unfile value in the system, you'll see this notice here, right? And this is just a warning to let you know that there is no value in your budget, or if there is value, it may change because it's in an unfiled status. The county auditor maybe needed to unfile and make a correction or a change because of a PAB order or what have you. So just sort of be aware if you go into the system and you see this highlighted. If it's a situation where value has already been filed once, you can always contact your county auditor or whoever in staff is working on that, and just see kind of what's going on if you're not aware. So just to review then, again, the max levy tab is going to be populated with your values. You're going to do this first of all. Everyone has to do it. It doesn't matter what your intentions are as far as growth or request in dollars. Everybody has to do this page. Everybody has to do this extra hearing. You just do it right off the bat and put in your maximum request. Again, you cannot exceed. Later on in your budget process, you cannot exceed whatever you indicated. Another thing to point out for folks is there was a slight change with your long-term debt schedule. So this is now a debt resolution number instead of a date certified. So just a clarification piece that was requested that should work a little bit better for folks as they certify. Again, so this is what your revenue tab would look like. Some of this information will be pulled over because again, what we did on our property tax page is we put in our requested tax, right? So these are not able to be entered. They're zeros, white cells, because it's going to pull over from that property tax tab. So, and down here we're a calculated field. So at any rate, this is where you fill in all your different revenue. And again, to point out, there is no longer an MHDS fund listed under special revenues, no MHDS fund. Now, if you're Polk County, you will still see an MHDS fund, but it's not going to be supported obviously by property tax. So your different service area tabs, this should be pretty self-explanatory. You know, these are all blue. You're going to be entering in your budget request by line item here. You're also going to be entering your re-estimated fiscal 22 and your actual 21 data. 21 actual is going to come from your county annual financial report, your cash report if you're a cash budget, or GAAP if you're GAAP. So you're going to pull that information directly from your AFR. Re-estimated is the information from your fiscal year 22 budget as amended or re-estimated So those would need to be plugged in as well. And then you enter in what you intend for your budget, and this will calculate a total for each of these lines, total by fund. Okay, and again, no MHDS fund. Now, when we hop to our service area 4, which is our mental health, intellectual disability, and developmental disabilities, unless you're Polk County, it's going to look like this. So budget for fiscal 23 budget, you cannot enter. It's going to just be zeros. Re-estimated 22 and actual 21, these can be entered, obviously. And they have to be entered. These are, you're going to report the total by line item, what actually happened from your AFR and what you had indicated in your budget as amended or re-estimated. So you can't enter anything unless you're Polk County for fiscal 23. And this just shows you what those exceed rule and exceed general look like. It's just, you know, you indicating your proposed tax rate, how much is that in excess of the $3.50 or $3.95, and then your major reasons, which you want to make sure are in line with the statutory reasons for which you can't exceed. If you want to include additional electronic virtual information on your notice, there is a text box at the bottom of the public hearing tab to add the information. You can also explain any significant items of increase in the budget there. It's up to you. This is just additional text space. There is also a significant amount of room in the location field of your notice, so you can enter it there, or if you don't have electronic meeting information to list, that's fine too. It's just an option for folks. With your when you're in your budget, you can always check errors, you can save, and you can print at any time. So when you print and save, you can print the full budget, and you can also print the publication notice at any time. After you propose your budget for publication, you can print just the publication notice as well. In Google Chrome, which is what we highly recommend you use as your browser, you can select your local printer to print off your items, or you can save to PDF. So thereby you print a hard copy or choose to save a PDF to your machine. And again, you have it for any future use, but you can come in later and print those off. They will be available at any time. Again, per the requirements of Senate File 634, your first task has got to be to complete that max levy notice sheet. Upon completion of that max levy form, you will see at the top the button Max Levy Propose. This generates a hearing notice for you to publish in the paper or post on your applicable online sites, social media, etc. And you do need to enter the hearing date, time, and place, and that's going to pull up on your notice. And this meeting location is where you can enter electronic meeting information if you have it. The system generates a notice again that you can print or save to PDF. You can enter data into the supplementary pages of the budget forms at any time, after the budget is open for you. But as far as process goes, you have to complete that max levy process prior to proposing the entire budget or publishing the notice for the entire budget. I just kind of want to make sure folks understand everybody has to do it and you have to do it first. You cannot publish the regular budget notice until that max levy notice has been proposed. So as you're working in the system, you'll actually see that proposed publish is going to be grayed out until you've done your max levy. Once you've proposed the max levy notice, then proposed publish for the regular hearing notice will be blue and available for you. Check errors. Of course, you can't publish your budget with errors. So you got to check your errors and it will show up here if you have any errors listed in your budget. If you have none, then it's going to be green and you can proceed and you can then publish your full budget. Again, you propose publish and then you get the screen to enter the date, time, and place. You enter your meeting location. And similar to the max levy notice, the system generates the notice that you print or save. If you exceed the general basic and or rule basic, you also have to publish these notices. If not, you'll still see those blank pages come out and you just ignore them. You don't obviously need to print those or send those to your newspaper. Following the public hearing, the board can make revisions to the budget as allowable, meaning decreasing tax asking or decreasing expenditures. So if you asked for $2 million in property tax and 500,000 in expenditures in your initial publication of your full budget notice, the board can then go on to reduce either of those numbers after the hearing. If that's the case, you'd go back into the system, you would return to draft. You'll see that at the top, and it just basically opens up the budget for edits and making changes. So you go in there, make your reductions, save, and again, you propose publish, but if you're going down in your expenditures or tax asking, you don't publish in the newspaper again or hold another hearing. You just leave the original publication date in there. Unless for some reason you actually are republishing, maybe there's an error in your publication process or what have you, and you actually do need to republish, then obviously you'd change the date. But at any rate, when that process is done, you would go on to adopt your budget. If no revisions are needed, again, you just adopt, and you'd enter your adoption date and your resolution number, because again, your budget has to be approved by resolution, and then you'd select adopt. So you'd file the following documents with the county auditor's office. You file the proof of publication for that max levy notice and your max levy resolution. You'd provide the proof of publication for your regular budget notice, and you'd provide the signed adopted budget and supplementary pages. We also recommend filing the budget resolution. So that's just an overview of the budget process. Keep in mind, though, I am available to help you if you have any questions throughout the process, and I can be reached by phone or by email. Thank you.